Hello everyone, this is Fantastic Worlds and welcome to the first of the Hush House lectures. Here we'll be discussing the story principles behind Hush House, the larger Cultist Simulator universe, and the real-life occult principles behind them. First, let's discuss what makes Brancrug Isle, apologies for my pronunciation in advance, special. In the game lore, the isle was considered magical even before humans settled on the isle, so to explore why this is, we'll need to dip into the most arcane of occult lore. Physics. Yes, one of the things you might find surprising is that the occult sciences and the fields of study more commonly accepted by the mainstream as science overlap more than you'd think. So let's discuss how dimensional membrane theory explains the power of Hush House by the concepts of ley lines. If you are familiar with esoteric concepts, you may have already heard of ley lines. These are theoretical lines of force associated with indigenous sacred structures like stone circles or Neolithic burial sites. The term was coined by Alfred Watkins in the 1920s, so approximately a decade before the events of Cultist Simulator and Hush House, when he recognized that such sites in the British Isles tended to run along straight lines on the map. Watkins originally thought these were due to trade routes. However, since some of those routes would go directly through mountains, that didn't last too long as a theory. Later, in the 1960s, the theory became that they were landing routes or UFOs. That also did not last too long. Experiments in a more scientific manner in the 1970s onwards by British parapsychologists, however, measured higher than usual levels of magnetic force along these lines. Furthermore, the lines often intersected at places where Neolithic areas of worship were established. This led to the theory that the sites were placed at these points where the lines crossed due to higher available energies at that intersection. Now, advancements in multidimensional theory in the late 20th and early 21st centuries proposed that these lines of force were the gravitational skeleton that informed the physical structure of the world, a sort of wireframe beneath the skin of reality. These thin spots, which I call nexus point or nexi, can allow energies to pass from these higher dimensional realities to our reality. In the pre-Kabbalistic and Kabbalistic occult systems that part of the Cultist Simulator mythos is roughly based on, the source that all things and energies come from and ultimately return to can be defined by a number of terms. Nihil, for example, the void, or as the Cultist Simulator world calls it, nothing. While these words commonly invoke the image of a complete absence, the opposite is closer to the truth. They are everything. The Kabbalistic scholar Mosey Idell pointed out that the translation of this concept in English is better translated as no thing, the state of formlessness, a vast chaotic space filled with the potential to be all things, but yet nothing at the same time. In a occult system, this state of being would exist as a source of all energy and, well, theoretically, as you know in physics, all matter is just kind of solidified energy. So these energies would pass down through dimensional layers, through these nexus points, and then move along the ley lines like water would river, introducing these energies into our world. Brancrug Isle being set on one or more of these nexus points makes sense within the context of the game. In the game, this influx of dimensional energies manifests most commonly with the weather cards that the player receives each dawn. Weather is often considered an indicator of the energetic state of the landscape. This is reflected in the principles generated by each weather card, with the relatively weak principles of a simple cloudy day be only giving you essentially 1 point in 2 principles, to the extremely strong principles within a gale or storm, which will give you 4 points in the appropriate one. This is less that the weather is producing the energetic principles that we can tap for our magical needs, and more the idea that the energy passing through the nexus point that we can tap also causes the weather. Thus, the more intense the energies, the more intense the weather. Then there is also the Pneuma event, in which the isle for 1 day is placed between worlds and the character is placed in a state in which they can no longer recognize fully the reality in which it has been placed. This, combined with the fact Pneuma card has the highest principles of all weather cards, 5 points, indicates the dimensional barrier has thinned between the higher dimensional, highly energetic reality and the physical world of the Isle. This is also where the multiple references of Brancrug Isle being a spot where it's easier to access alternative realities comes from. So, when the magically inclined ancestors of humanity discovered that the isle was situated upon such an energy-rich nexus point, they decided to capitalize upon this property for their own advantage. Thus began the long history of human secret societies establishing competing strongholds upon the Brancrug Isle, a history running up to the events of the Book of Hours and Hush House. Well, I hope you enjoyed this quick look behind the occult nature of the Cultist Simulator and Book of Hours universe. This series is possible due to the help of our channel supporters, and one of those perks supporters receive is to take part in the polls to decide which subject we'll be tackling in the next episode. So, if you are a supporter, you should receive that poll. If you're not, consider it. Anyways, as always, like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification button, and I will see you next time.